Mr. President, on Monday, we observed but did not celebrate Labor Day. I say observed and did not celebrate because we are painfully aware that there are at least 29 million unemployed and underemployed Americans in our midst. Last Friday, the Department of Labor sent shockwaves through the global economy by reporting that the U.S. economy created 0 net jobs in August. A growing chorus of economists are warning against the dangers of making immediate, draconian cuts to the federal budget, something that by its very nature will drain demand, reduce growth, and destroy jobs. But tragically, too many members of Congress refuse to listen. Over the summer, they have insisted on a mindless march to immediate austerity, an approach that threatens to strangle the weak economy. Here inside the Washington bubble, some of our political leaders continue to insist that the biggest issue is the budget deficit. But outside this beltway, ordinary Americans are desperately concerned with a far more urgent deficit, the jobs deficit. But, Mr. President, I am also concerned about a third deficit, the deficit of vision and leadership today in Washington. I am disturbed by our failure to confront the current economic crisis with the boldness and vision that earlier generations of Americans summoned in times of national challenge. Smart countries, Mr. President, in tough economic times, do not just turn a chainsaw on themselves. Instead of the current slash and burn approach, which is being sold through fear and fatalism, we need an approach that reflects the courage and determination of the American people. By all means, we must agree on necessary spending cuts and revenue increases, but we also must continue to invest in the things that will spur economic growth, create jobs, and rebuild the middle class. Mr. President, I cannot emphasize too strongly the importance of restoring the middle class in America. I have given several floor speeches on this very subject. The committee that I'm privileged to chair, the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, we've had hearings on what's happened to the middle class. In fact, on September the 1st, our committee issued this report, Saving the American Dream, the Past, Present, and Uncertain Future of America's Middle Class. Mr. President, I have not asked until now, but I would ask that the concurrence of my remarks that this report be printed in the record.
Without objection.
Restoring the middle class is essential to boosting demand and revitalizing our economy. It's the only way we're going to be able to restore long-term fiscal balance here at the federal level. Economists across the political spectrum, from left to right, agree that a major cause of our current economic stagnation is a chronic lack of demand. For nearly 3 decades, workers' incomes have been stagnant. Simply put, they lack the purchasing power to drive America's consumer economy. And without adequate demand, businesses are reluctant to invest and hire. Adjusted for inflation, average hourly earnings in 1970 were $18.80 an hour, or $39,104 annually. Average hourly earnings in 1970, $39,104. However, by 2009, those inflation-adjusted average hourly earnings had actually declined to $18.63 an hour, or $38,750 a year. Imagine that. From 1970 to 2009, average hourly earnings went down. Well, you might say, so what? Well, so what? This second chart will show you what's happening to the middle class. The rising cost of essentials. At the same time as earnings have stagnated or actually gone down a little bit, the costs that make up the largest part of a family budget have skyrocketed. Here's the food budget, up 2%. Gas, up 18%. Rent and utilities, up 41%. Health expenditures, up 50%. Public colleges, up 80%. The price of a home, up 97%. The cost of a private college, up 113%. No wonder the middle class is finding it harder and harder to make ends meet. However, at the same time, let's take a look at what's happening at the higher end of the income spectrum. Let's see what's happened to CEO compensation during the same period of time. I said average hourly earnings have gone down. The value of the minimum wage, and I will talk about that in a minute, the value of a minimum wage has gone down 19%. 19% from 1970 to last year. But the median executive compensation, this is the median, executive compensation has gone up 430% in the same time. Any surprise that people are a little upset around America? That middle-class families are kind of edgy today? Edgy? Sure they're edgy. How are they going to afford to send their kids to college? How are they going to buy a new home? Get out from under the ones that are already underwater? Providing rent, buying gasoline for their cars in places in rural areas where they have to drive a car to go to work or to go to school or to go to church. So, Mr. President, how do we boost incomes and restore people's purchasing power? Well, a number of ways we need to do this. I would suggest one. To start with, we need to restore a robust right to organize unions and bargain collectively. I say that unabashedly. It's no coincidence that the decline of the middle class has coincided with the dramatic decline of union membership in the United States. Why is that? Because unions provide workers with the leverage to ensure that they share in their company's gains through better wages and benefits, and are not just providing company CEOs with even larger pay packages. Okay, that's just one step. Another very practical step we can take to boost purchasing power is to increase the minimum wage. The minimum wage today is $7.25. If we raise the minimum wage to make up for what's lost due to inflation over the last 40 years, it would be $10.39 an hour. So as we saw here, where the average CEO pay has gone up 430%, the minimum wage, adjusted for inflation, the adjusted would be $10.39 an hour today. It's only $7.25 an hour. So as the minimum wage has gone down, median executive compensation has gone up 430%. A raise in the minimum wage puts money into the pockets of low-income consumers who are very likely to immediately spend it at local businesses. Most importantly, of course, we have to create more jobs, but not just any jobs, but quality jobs with fair wages and real benefits that can support a family and help hardworking people build a brighter future. That's the way we'll put demand back in the economy and get the country moving again. Tomorrow evening, President Obama will present to Congress his plan for boosting job creation and lifting the economy. I urge the President to point out that there are some things, big national undertakings, that the private sector simply is not capable of doing. At critical junctures, going back to the beginning of our republic, the federal government has stepped up to the plate. Congresses and presidents have acted decisively to spur economic growth, foster innovation, help create jobs. We need that kind of bold action today. The mantra that I hear from my friends on the Republican side is that, quote, government can't create jobs. That's nonsense. Smart government can create jobs, and short-sighted government can destroy jobs. For example, the brief shutdown of the Federal Aviation Administration this summer put nearly 70,000 private sector construction employees out of work. Draconian cuts proposed by House Republicans to the new transportation bill would destroy an estimated 490,000 highway construction jobs and nearly 100,000 transit-related jobs. That is dysfunctional government. Dysfunctional government making the problem even worse. By contrast, across our history, an often visionary and bold federal government has funded and spearheaded initiatives that have expanded private commerce, given birth to countless inventions and new industries, and created tens of millions of jobs. As we all know, during the presidency of Franklin Roosevelt, with the private sector paralyzed by the Great Depression, the federal government responded with an astonishing array of initiatives to restart the economy, restore opportunity, create jobs. I still have on my wall in my office, and I'll bet I'm the only senator on this floor of the Senate today who can say this, I have the actual WPA form of my father that worked on the Works Projects Administration. He got a job to help feed his family. And some of the things that my father worked on in WPA exist today, still used by the public, still used by kids going to high school. And a lot of times people say, well, you know, that was all well and good, but that didn't stop the Depression. It was World War II. Well, what was World War II but massive government infusion into the economy? By the end of the Second World War, wartime investments in plants and equipments and making tanks and airplanes and all kinds of things, which we then turned over to the private sector. Those wartime investments created an industrial colossus like the world has never seen. And Franklin Roosevelt and President Truman were followed by a Republican president, Dwight Eisenhower. President Eisenhower, I'm sure a very proud Republican, was also determined to move America forward. He championed one of the greatest public works projects in American history, the construction of the interstate highway system. A 1996 study of that system concluded, and I quote, "The interstate highway system is an engine that has driven 40 years of unprecedented prosperity and positioned the United States to remain the world's preeminent power into the 21st century," end quote. This kind of visionary thinking by both Democratic presidents and Republican presidents is by no means a relic of the distant past. In more recent times, the federal government has funded and spearheaded scientific discovery and innovation that has had profound impacts on our economy, spawning scores of new industries, creating millions of high-value jobs. I would just mention a few. Specifically, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, called DARPA, invented the internet, making possible everything from email to social networking to the World Wide Web. Federal researchers at the same DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, invented the Global Positioning Satellite System. I can remember when I first came to the Congress as a House member on the House Science and Technology Committee, when we first started authorizing funding for the GPS system. And a lot of people at that time were saying, oh, no, this is not the role for the federal government. Only the private sector could do it. But the private sector could not undertake that at that point in time. So the federal government put up the satellites, and the private sector took over. And we have Garmins and TomToms, and we have all kinds of things for airplanes now and cars and boats, all made by the private sector, employing people in private sector jobs because the federal government put forth the money and the investment to put that system in place. Need I mention NASA? A number of technological breakthroughs over the year, everything from microchips to CAT scanner technology. And of course, any discussion of the federal role in promoting our economy would not be complete without mentioning the National Institutes of Health. More than 80 Nobel Prizes have been awarded for NIH-supported research. You might say, well, what's that benefited us? Recently, the Battelle Memorial Institute, a non-government research institute, reported on the federal government's $3.8 billion investment in the Human Genome Project from 1988 to 2003. Battelle estimates that this federal investment of $3.8 billion in taxpayer money has produced a staggering $796 billion in economic output. In 2010 alone, this genomic revolution generated $67 billion in U.S. economic output and supported 310,000 jobs. So these are the kind of investments that's one of the best ways to reduce budget deficits. They will help many of the 29 million unemployed and underemployed get jobs and become taxpayers again. With the private sector engine again threatening to stall out, there is a critical role for the federal government in creating demand and preventing a slide back into recession. The most obvious way forward, with the support across the political spectrum, including the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, is to dramatically ramp up federal investments in infrastructure in order to boost U.S. competitiveness. The American Society of Civil Engineers estimates that America faces a $2.2 trillion infrastructure backlog. Bringing this U.S. infrastructure into the 21st century would create millions of private sector jobs, especially in the hard-hit construction industry, while modernizing the arteries and veins of commerce. As someone once recently said, think about it this way. We're still driving on Eisenhower's highways and going to Roosevelt schools. It's time to do it for the next century. So, Mr. President, there can be no economic recovery, no return to fiscal balance without the recovery of the middle class. And there will not be a recovery of the middle class unless and until we come to grips with the need for federal investment in education, innovation, research, and infrastructure. It means restoring a level playing field with fair taxation, vibrant unions, a strong ladder of opportunity to give every American access to the middle class. So, Mr. President, I hope that President Obama will be bold like presidents of the past. I hope that he will put forward a very bold, visionary, challenging proposal tomorrow night to challenge us to the better natures, to the better side of our human nature, to recapture again what we've done in the past. In that way, we can rebuild the middle class, and we can put America back to work. And I believe, Mr. President, that is the only way that we're going to be able to do it.